Welcome to episode 335 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Fountain Tire. Fountain Tire specializes in tire and auto service, so you don't have to settle for a good deal or good customer service, because at Fountain Tire, they do both. They'll treat your vehicle. If you need new tires or maybe your engine has a little rattle, stop in a Fountain Tire and they'll sort you out. And right now, you can save up to $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, but only until December 14th. So you have a month. Plus, you can save an additional $50 anytime you do a service of $150 or more. Stop in a Fountain Tire or make an appointment at fountaintire.com. I'm Jason Greger. We welcome in Frank Saravalli, fresh off of a Hall of Fame night in Toronto. Frank, and you know what? Obviously, it's a big night for those people getting inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame and their friends and family, former teammates, and you see everybody there. It's always a big deal. Shout out to Scotty Burnside. Well-deserved for him to go in. And then, of course, all the players and managers as well.
It's always an amazing weekend. Doesn't matter how many times you've been here. Gets you every single time. The emotion, everything that gets wrapped into the weekend. And they do it so well here, treating everyone so well. It really is like a great league party where for one weekend, wins and losses, there's all 32 GMs here for GM meetings today. Wins and losses don't, not that they don't mean as much, but everyone's kind of relaxed. Waivers, whatever else is required, that kind of takes a back seat, and it's about celebrating some of the best of all time. And honestly, it's one of my favorite weekends of the year. Did you hear Jeremy Roenick's speech?
Yeah, I watched it with my wife and son, actually. So,
and did you hear the Mike Keenan urinal joke?
Yeah.
So oddly enough, I actually have my own Mike Keenan urinal story. I was in my 20s covering the Flyers for the Daily News back at the old Madison Square Garden pre-reno. And they had this press room that was sort of right off the concourse where you could kind of duck in under the stands. And it was a small little area, but there was a washroom back there. And I'll never forget, I'm saddle up to the urinal and Mike Keenan walks in. Right.
Were the Rangers at the time?
No, I don't even know what he was doing there. He wasn't working for the Rangers. I have no idea why he was there. Maybe doing media, something. I have no idea. So obviously, knowing my hockey history, I knew he was the coach of the Flyers. I'm just literally doing my business, not minding anyone. Okay, I'm at the urinal, and I'm just minding my thing, and Mike Keenan goes, "That's all you got?" And I was just like, "What?" I literally just like zipped up and walked out. I might have actually like pissed myself a little bit, but apparently that's his thing is the urinal conversation.
Just tries to get everybody uncomfortable.
It worked. Did you hear JR? He said, had he looked over the divider, I might not have been their first round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, what a stunt. That's your go-to is like, let me just absolutely rattle the guy's cage and the next urinal over.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because some people are like, man, that's when you don't want the conversation. Usually you're at the urinal, you're staring straight forward, you're not talking, you're just like, here to go, do my business, I'm out. Unless you're at the bar with your buddy. Sometimes you'll have drunken conversations standing there.
That's totally different. I'm just saying, obviously this is a theme, and I've told many other media people this story, so they've heard it. But I was like, hey, when JR was talking, I was like, hey, that was me. And I didn't know him. Like, it's not like not someone at all that I knew.
Yeah. Well, Conscious should have laughed, hey, buddy, let's have a measuring contest, see what happens. Got to counter back. That's probably what he's looking for, is to see what kind of retort people give him.
Yeah, well, for me, I'm just like, zip up and get out of there. Holy Christ.
Well, his story for Doug Wilson, though, was obviously the one that stood out to me, of course, as well. Just how, he admitted that, and lots of players, you know what, your career maybe ends before you want it. And, you know, as he said, he was drinking and heavily, and, you know, Doug Wilson kind of saved him, got him back on track a little bit, was able to salvage his life and end his NHL career in a much better fashion.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the story that his wife shared to kind of kick off Hall of Fame weekend, saying that he had wanted so bad to be included in the Hall and be part of it that it took him, you know, until earlier this year to really kind of take a step back and reset. And you kind of heard him mention that toward the very end of his speech. That look, sometimes the less, you know, you push and want something, the more it comes to you. And I don't know how that works in the world, but it obviously was eating at him. And I understand why. Like, this really good dynamic player that put up fantastic numbers is, you know, 12 years, 13 years into the process and still hasn't gotten the call. I could see that really eating at you when you want it so bad. And to see him finally get in, you understand the emotion.
Yeah, the other thing I really liked was the honesty, because I've heard some well, you know, I never thought about it really, and maybe some don't, but I don't know. When you're that good and you're that close and you look at your career, I think it would be impossible for someone not to think, hey, I think I'm deserving of that. It doesn't mean that maybe you don't think about it 24/7, but I've always kind of questioned when those, I never really thought about it. I'm like, come on, as if you never thought about it. Like, you've had a, you know what, you're right on the cusp. People have brought your name up many times. I don't know. I've always, so I like the fact that he's like, yeah, like, you know what, almost I obsessed over it. It became too much. But I think that's a more realistic viewpoint for a human being to, because everybody likes accolades. I don't care who you are. Somebody walks down the street and says, hey, I really like your shoes. Oh, thank you. Right. Something you weren't looking for, but I don't know anybody who doesn't like that. And so I've always kind of been a little taken aback. And I don't necessarily think that's 100% honest when someone says, oh, I've never thought about it. It's like, come on. You guys are you're ultra competitive people. That's what makes you an NHL player. And you're telling me you've never thought about it. If you're like, I get why maybe, you know, third and fourth line guys who had good careers, but never stood out, they don't think about it. But like, lots of the star players, and we know who they are, the guys who are in that competition, of course they thought about it.
It's, yeah, only, I think the Hall of Fame debate is like really simple to me. I know that sounds funny to say. Yeah, do numbers play in, and are certain people or players on the border? Yeah. But for me, it's always a gut instinct reaction. Watching that player, eye test wise, are they a Hall of Famer? Yes or no? And generally, whatever your gut says is probably pretty close to what it ends up being. Because I think a lot of people view it in a similar prism. So anyone that's even in the realm of that conversation, how could you have not at some point in your life thought about that? Yeah.
I could see
That's
how
humble
you'd say,
for the
okay,
sake of being humble.
yeah, I could say that you got to say, okay, stop thinking about it. Okay, sure, right? Like Alex McGillney, he's the one player of all the people not in the Hall who I think who's been, I would say, overlooked for a long time. He's the one guy I have that's deserving of going in.
Yeah, well, guess what? He's probably not going in next year either.
Right, who's going in? I haven't even looked.
I think next year's class is full already with first-time eligibles. Carey Price, Zdeno Chara, Duncan Keith, and Joe Thornton. I mean, that's your max of 4. That they all, I mean, again, eye test, simple yes or no. Do all 4 of those guys go in?
Yeah, but I've been saying that for a decade on Alex McGillney. Like, Alex McGillney was unbelievable in his career.
Agree, but there's obviously something that someone somewhere or some people part of the committee's turned over multiple times over the last 10 years. Yeah. That's the one thing about Hall of Fame that I think not enough people appreciate, as some people rail on the topic of why is the voting process so secret? Well, there's also term limits on the 18-member committee, and every year or every 2 years, everyone's changed out. Not everyone, but you know, the percentage of the board that turns over, a quarter of it or whatever. It's a revolving door. So you're constantly getting new, fresh opinions. He's been through like 5 different iterations of committees. if they're all unapproving or disapproving,
or
then
it doesn't get nominated one year, right? That's the other thing. You have to be nominated for that specific year.
yeah, and that's the other thing we don't have line of sight on. And maybe if I were to make an argument for more transparency, I don't think there is a ton to make, because I don't believe that the process should be public,
No,
particularly with former players voting on it and Hall of Famers. But I think you could potentially have a little bit more transparency when it comes to who is actually being talked about. Give us the list. Just say these people were in conversation this year.
Yeah, that'd be pretty simple. So, yeah, I don't think not everything needs to be public knowledge, because there's going to be unnecessary shrapnel towards people, but at least you'd know then, and maybe it's a sanity for the players. Hey, you know what? At least I'm in the conversation. But Alex McGillney, if you don't get in, I think you should be in.
So can I just, before we move on, I just want to give a quick shout out to our guy at dailyfaceoff.com, Paul Paduti, who just does such an amazing job every year with his Hall of Fame work. I know his Paduti point system and properly sort of giving context to all these players in their careers. It's the gold standard. No one has done better work in the Hockey Hall of Fame space, and we are very fortunate to have him part of our team. I saw him here in Toronto last night at the Hall, and he does great work. So thank you, Paul, for all that you do.
Nice. Speaking of Hall of Famers, Frank, I think this guy, once he retires, will for sure be a Hockey Hall of Famer. He's when he retires, he's going to be the NHL leader in regular season goals in Alex Ovechkin, and Ovi is having himself one heck of a start to a season again. And when you look at his start, he just, another example, he had a tough first 40 games last year. Well, closer to 50 actually. And then though, down the stretch, he scored 23 and 31, got him to 30 goals again. He's had at least 30 goals in every season but one, and that was a lockout shortened season. He is absolutely on fire. 10 goals in 14 games. It's the 9th time he's done that in his career. And when he does it, the fewest goals he's ever scored is 46. And he's reached 50 multiple times, 5 times, in fact, 49, 48. And you see it on the screen there. It's crazy. He could, in the same season, he could break Gretzky's record and also break Bossy and Gretzky's record of the most 50-goal seasons. He's on pace for 50 at his age. And, he's been in the league since 2006. It's amazing, the durability and the longevity of Ovechkin and what he's done. And he just seems inspired by the chase, but also by the renewed competitiveness of his team.
Look, what he's doing this year, there is nothing short. It's nothing short of ridiculous. Really. I mean,
yeah.
It was interesting to hear Spencer Carberry talk about his game over the last couple of days. This isn't all, there's been a lot of talk about, oh, look who's getting all the assists. Look at his line mates. They've developed chemistry. That part has been really fascinating to watch. I think that's secondary to the success that he's had this year. He is, one thing Carberry mentioned, shot selection, which for Ovi, who's always been a volume shooter, I think that'd be an interesting sort of study to do in terms of how is he more choosy with his shots this year. That'd be a great little analytical project. But beyond that, he's just moving way better. That's the biggest change year over year. The reason he struggled last year is he couldn't get to spots to get open to find ice to shoot because he just was far too slow. And I don't know if he entered last season in poor shape and it just took him a while to get in shape. Whatever the case may be, it's quite obvious to me watching that he's in drastically better condition than he was at this time last year. And maybe that's an obvious thing too, in the sense that, yeah, when you're that age, it's maybe you got to change things up. Maybe you got to shake up your routine. Maybe the status quo, maybe what always worked for you in your career. I think it's a great reminder for players as they get older. Like you have to change up your routine. The same workout and conditioning and everything that you did when you were 22 and 25, maybe that's not what you should be doing at 34.
Well, my understanding, Frank, I don't know if you saw Chris Kreider. He used those rocket gear, that weighted training that some of the hockey players use. And my understanding is Ovechkin used that all summer. And it's just a bunch of weights. You know, there's lots of studies that go into behind it, and they you put it on your shin pad, and it just allows you to get a better skate in a little bit shorter period of time. Now, Ovi was always a pretty good skater for a big man, right? Like he could fly, but I agree with you. He looks slower. Now, who knows? Was he battling a nagging injury? I think we've seen the difference in some players when they're not 100%, and the percentage gap where you're maybe 100% to only 95 or 90 slows certain guys down, right? And so who knows? But you're right. He looks a lot quicker. Him and Strome definitely have some chemistry. There's no question. I think most good goal scorers historically would need someone who's a pretty decent disher at that point, right? Backstrom for many years. You look at Brett Hull when he had Adam Oates. Yari Curry had Wayne Gretzky. You go down the list. But Ovi's, I wonder how much mentally it is too. Like they're used to being a pretty competitive team for the most part in his career, right? Like outside the first few years, once they became competitive, I know they only won one cup, and some people get so focused on a cup, but Washington was a top dog for many, many years, and just unfortunately couldn't beat Pittsburgh in the second round. And I wonder how much of that, even though I know they made the playoffs, but early on they couldn't score to save their life as a team. And now they go out in this offseason. I loved what they did in the offseason, right? They brought in 3 or 4 new guys, and Ovechkin is definitely a different player this year, and it's fun to watch. Like it now, some people at the start of the year were, geez, I think he'll do it next year. Now everybody's like, well, when's he going to do it this year? Like he could, Tyler was talking about it before the pod about how Ovi needs 31 goals in 47 games. Then he would beat Gretzky or tie him as far as, same amount of games played to reach 894 goals. And that's so I know it's completely different eras and there's lots of other things you have to take into account, but that just shows really how close they are. And even if he doesn't,
he already is the greatest goal scorer of all time.
Yeah. Wow. Not much debate about it. Like what's unique about it, Frank, is for the longest time, people knew where he was going to score from and they still couldn't stop him.
And he's still scoring from there.
Yeah. Well, the longevity factor helps today's players. I don't think anybody can discount that. You look at the great players are able to stay at a high level longer in every sport. And that's due to nutrition, training, education, all that stuff. So, players of the past, we always have to be considering that because you used to have like a 10-year window is what it was considered. Like, you had 10 years to be elite and then your body would wear down. Well, nowadays it doesn't happen. Like look at LeBron James, in basketball, and you look at other athletes like the true top ones, they can remain great for longer. Now it's hard work. Don't get me wrong. You got to train, you got to be dedicated, you got to be committed, all of that. But we can't overlook that today's athletes have more advantages to maximize their skill set longer.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. Maybe more advantages, but it's also way more difficult to score. The goalies are so much better. Like it's insane. You watch 1980s hockey. It's not even the same sport.
Well, it's because the positions, if today's goalies, Frank, had to be stand-up goalies, would they be that much better?
It's not even just that. It's equipment. It's technique. It's everything. Yeah. Like they take up so much more net. Yeah, how many goals were scored quite literally flat on the ice in the 1980s?
Well, because goalies, no one was down in a like nowadays, they go down in a butterfly on almost every shot. So that's why guys shoot upstairs.
But it's insanely harder to score.
Yeah.
I'd venture to say 75% harder to score now than in the 80s.
That might be a little high.
I don't think so.
Yeah. They got advancements in sticks and everything else that do help the shooters too. Right. So, but because I look at it overall, and either way, I don't want to disparage any other ones because that's all they had was what they knew at the time. So We some advancements are good, some advancements maybe not so much as we see in real life. But either way, Ovi, I would agree with you on that. And as you watch Ovi, and to me, and I know we touched on it briefly, but the closest young player, people look at Austin Matthews, and his biggest challenge is going to be longevity. And can you be as good as Ovi was in his 30s? And then can you stay healthy as Ovi was? And that's, Matthews has already missed now close to as many games or more than Ovi has in his career.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Matthews, though, because it's a perfect segue. I want to talk Leafs quickly. Everyone was wondering last week, what are they going to do when they have this roster situation that pops up and they need to activate everyone? This is why you don't put someone on waivers and or make a trade before you absolutely have to. You end up with a Max Pacioretty injury. You end up with another guy on your team going down. Everyone was, and look, I was in there reporting on it last week. Hey, what are they going to do? Well, Matt Benning, he ends up on waivers. That was an obvious one, but now they don't need to make a second move because they had another injury and Max Pacioretty's week to week. Anytime that I'm on the phone with a GM and I hear him quote Lou Lamoriello and say, if you have time, use it, I roll my eyes and groan because they're obviously, they're taking as much time as possible and stalling and also not giving me details on what I'm looking for in terms of their game plan. But there is certainly more than a kernel of truth to it.
Oh, 100%. Why would you do something before you have to when it comes to asset management? It doesn't make sense. And because as you outlined, and the Pacioretty injury, God, it looked ugly at the time. And now they're saying only week to week, which who knows how many weeks. Looked like it was going to be much worse. And so yeah, that buys you a little bit more time. And sadly, in 3 weeks or a month when he comes back, someone else might get hurt by then. You never know.
Yeah, it's why you hang on to bodies as long as you can. And when you never know when you need them.
Yeah. Or another team, Frank, might have injuries and now they're suddenly in the market for a trade that they weren't in the market for at this time. So 100%, it makes, when a guy's 24 hours or 48 hours from being activated, that's when you have to start thinking about it. Yeah. So, quickly, let's bring in, we'll bring in Ty a little bit earlier today. Ty, how you doing?
You guys are lucky that I wasn't making eggs or whatever. I went and got my coffee a couple minutes ago. Back with a fresh edition.
You said at the 22-minute mark. You gave me a line of when you wanted in, so I'm trying to follow it.
You nailed it. Back with another edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by our friends at Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. Download the app and use the promo code NATION, NATION, all capital letters, to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We're just about halfway through November. So today for Buy or Sell, I want to ask you guys about some things that could or couldn't happen by the end of the month. So I wanted to start with the hottest team in the league, the Winnipeg Jets. They have 14 wins already, 14-1. They have 9 more games remaining this month. Do you think the Jets can get to 20 wins by December 1st, go 6-3 to finish out the month? It sounds crazy that a team could be at 20 wins by December 1st, but obviously their pace is unreal, and 6-3 isn't crazy. Frank, you buying or selling on the Jets keeping the heater going?
I mean, at this pace, it'd be hard to sell, right? Here's the funny thing. So I did a Frankly Speaking episode yesterday with Kevin Cheveldayoff, which will come out tomorrow, talking about that's Wednesday, November 13th, talking about the Jets' hot start. We were just kind of BSing before the interview started. I said, well, how's it going? He said, well, if I complained right now, would anyone listen? And I said, would you be a GM if you didn't complain? And so he was saying, what's funny about our start? And obviously, they found ways to win. But he goes, look at that game against Colorado. He goes, we definitely didn't have it. And Connor Hellebuck refused to let us lose. And I also had Kyle Davidson on a separate episode. And he's like, we had the Jets, down. It was third period. They needed a goal just to tie to get to OT. There have been multiple moments so far where the Jets haven't had their A game and yet have found a way to win. That might be the most impressive part of this 14 wins in 15. So I'll buy.
Well, the remaining games, they only have one at home. So they basically play all 9 games in different cities. They got the Rangers in Tampa and Florida. Then they come home for one game against the same Florida Panthers. Then they're back on the road, Pittsburgh, Nashville, Mini, LA, and Vegas. So they're playing like outside of Pittsburgh, there's no like real terrible team in there at all. Florida's good. The Rangers are good. Minnesota's playing unreal. Vegas, even LA's competitive. So, but I still think 6-3 is very doable. Do I think they go 8-1? That might be a stretch. So I'll say they go 6-2-1.
Oof, man.
Even better than 6-3.
Yeah. Next one I got for you. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. I know this one's kind of a bit of a whatever underhanded question, or it's talked about a lot, cliche, but a coaching change by the end of the month. I just can't help watching the Pittsburgh Penguins last night. And I know, again, we've talked about them a bit, but they just got absolutely smoked. They look lifeless. Boston is one that at least Bruins fans that I see on Twitter are talking about. Is Montgomery coming to the end of the line here? He's a lame duck coach. Greg's, you buying or selling on a coaching change anywhere by December 1?
Well, I'd be surprised if it's Boston, right? Like, what are they, 14th or 15th in the NHL? Everybody thinks they've had a tough start. Pittsburgh, if it was any other coach in Pittsburgh, I'd think, yeah, it's realistic. But man, like Mike Sullivan seems pretty entrenched there. So, and I know there'd been some rumblings that, him and Dubas didn't get along right away, but that's necessarily not the case. And I don't know, like, I look at their roster in Pittsburgh and bring in another coach. Is that going to change? Like, to me, the construction of that team has been horrific. And in fact, you can make an argument that Dubas has made it worse since he came in. So
he's definitely made it worse.
Yeah. If I was going to say coaching change by the end of the month, there's not, I don't really see an obvious one that stands out. Like, unless, honestly, I still think the one guy, if they find themselves at the end of the month still in 25th, I think the Detroit Red Wings are still the team that might make the trade.
Yeah, I think they're the odds favorite coming into the year. So that makes sense. Sorry, go ahead, Frank.
No, I was just going to, the premise of the question, you're basically, will anyone fire their coach between now and December 1st? Yeah, I'll buy that. Like, you mentioned some of the possibilities I mentioned last week. I think you've got to start watching the Anaheim Ducks. Any one of those teams could get to a point where they say, "Uncle, we've had enough."
Yeah. Oh, it's fair, man. Like, but man, Pittsburgh, like that first period, my God, that was an absolute ass kicking. If anybody hadn't seen it, 6-0. And like it was a deserving 6-0. Sometimes guys, you'll have some unlucky goals. Like, Dallas was all over them. They're just like, it was almost like the no moss.
How many odd man rushes and breakaways were there? It was insane. And so then they make the goalie change, and then Nedeljkovic comes in and he allows 2 goals in his first 2 minutes in the net.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can't even blame goaltending. Like it was Kevin Woodley talked about it. Do you know what Tristan Jarry's expected save percentage was before he got sent down? 832. He says the Pittsburgh defense is absolutely horrific. The environment to play goal there, it goes, you could put 2 goalies in net and maybe you'd have a chance. Like their defensive coverage and what they give up is horrific.
The Pittsburgh Penguins are 28th in the league in points percentage. I picked them to finish 8th and last in the Metro. No, I didn't. Sorry, 7th. I'm discounting the Blue Jackets. I did have the Blue Jackets there. But this is a bottom 5 team in talent, top to bottom.
Oof. Like, and Frank, I know everybody, when I said Sidney Crosby would have been better off to wait it out, get traded and go. And I know that it's hard, but does Sid want to end his career like this? They're not even close to competitive.
I'm going to take Sid at his word until we hear otherwise. Cause he has
I
been
don't discount it, but
100% consistent.
Yeah. I don't discount that he will, but I'm like, should he? Like, I don't know.
How many more? It's not a guy that hasn't won though either. Yeah. He's won 3 times.
It would help the organization. It would help himself. Like, now here's the thing, Frank. I wonder, does it change when he gets to the 4 Nations and now he's back in that competitive nature and he's like, oh my God, I miss this more than I thought. I wonder.
Or he gets playing with a couple of players, maybe like a Nathan MacKinnon, and is like, shit, this actually might be kind of fun.
playing with any of them.
Yeah.
And still at 8.7 cap hit, buddy, I'm telling you, teams would be lining up to take him.
Oh, just on like, I'm not being funny. Marketing alone, he would pay for himself.
Oh yeah. I was thinking about this last night when I was doing the buy or sell questions, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to ask them about Sid ever getting traded. I was like, because he's just signed that deal. But then there was a part of me, the conspiracy side of my brain was like, 8.7 is so cheap. Maybe he signed it at 8.7 again because he loves doing that whole thing, but also like at 50% retained, any team could very easily squeeze you in. It's a bit of a bad contract going the other way. Like, man.
Stop it.
Hey, maybe Sid's playing chess here and everybody else is playing checkers. He's like, I signed my contract. Now the team that trades for me knows I'm under contract, right? Rather than if I trade where I don't have a contract, I go there. It might not guarantee I sign there. Now, if I get traded and I accept the trade, they know that I'm staying there.
Stop
Frank's
it.
going to reach through the screen and slap us both. I'll move on then. Last one I got for you is about Connor McDavid. I was actually going to ask this question about Matthews and his goals as well, but with him being hurt, it's too hard to kind of project. But
wait, can I just add one thing? I just need to get this off my chest. Exactly what you just said is like, I find to be like 80% wrong with our society right now on social media. It doesn't matter whatever the established fact is. No one gives a shit, and everyone, it's a conspiracy. Whether it's the COVID vaccine, pick one subject of the election deniers. Like, just like, can we not just accept an established fact as that? That's all I'm saying is like, I look, I'm a journalist. I question everything. I understand, but like, holy God, he couldn't be more consistent, and then put his money where his mouth is, sign for less, and already did it before stepping on the ice this season. He's not going anywhere unless he decides that he wants to. And I don't have any evidence.
He's allowed to change his mind, which is what I said.
Things change. I don't see it happening.
I believe that Sidney Crosby thought his team would be better than they are right now. I guarantee you, he thought they'd be better because he believes in his teammates. That doesn't surprise me at all, but they're not. And they might be worse than any of us thought.
I'm doing my own research.
Yeah. Okay. Point made.
My third buy or sell question. Connor McDavid, currently 54th in the NHL and 8 points back of being in the top 10. Are you buying or selling on him being back in the top 10 in league scoring by December 1st, Greggs? An 8-point gap, you think like, oh, that's easier for him to make up. But it's like, okay, he has to make up 8 points. And then all the guys in front of him also are great players. They're going to keep scoring too. So it's a tough one. We had a big debate about this at Nation head offices the other day.
Well, I'm pretty sure he did it last year. So, or somewhere around similar. He can reel off a few because he had 3 points against Vancouver. And it was kind of like a quiet 3-point game for him. Right now, they allowed some goals like that Brett Kulak goal. Oh my God, I could watch that. Kevin Lankinen could have that shot 1,000 times. I don't think he'd let it in again. Like that was brutal. But Connor still hasn't had those McDavid-like games where he brings you out of your seat 5 or 6 times a game. So, but it's McDavid. It'd be hard for me to say, but I'm still going to sell. He won't be top 10.
Yeah, I'm buying all day. He could reel off 40 points in 18 games.
But he only has 8.
He's 8 points back. So
yeah, I'm saying pace wise, like 8 points back and can make that up in the next 18 days. There isn't a person better equipped on planet Earth to do that.
So to compare
the crazy part about McDavid's, I was just going to say the crazy part about McDavid's season is that he's had a bunch of no-point games.
Yeah. Oh, I know. The other reason why
4
I said no,
of the
guys.
13 games he's played so far. We got a little delay on the internet. 4 of the 13 games he's played so far is 0 points. That's so unlike him.
I know. They also have a mini bye week at the last week of November, so I'm taking that into effect. They went 5 days without a game.
The schedule prick strikes again.
Know your facts, Frank. You're the one. Hey, know your facts.
Last year,
Okay.
it was dead on December 1st when he finally got back into a tie for 10th in league scoring. So right around the time the turnaround happened for 97 last year. All right, there you go. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Bet365.
You look at some of the players at the top of the leaderboard, Frank, and Marty Necas for the Carolina Hurricanes. We've talked in this pod for a long time. They never really had, a dominant off. They've had good guys, but no elite guys. Do you believe that Marty Necas is putting him, is this the breakout year for him?
As much as I want to believe it, the answer is no. I mean, I think he's going to cool off quite a bit.
Okay.
Will he be an 80-point player, an 85, 90-point player? Yes. I mean, he's already bitten off a huge chunk of that. But is he going to be in the 130-point range? No, I don't see that.
What about Nate MacKinnon? Nate MacKinnon last year, as I outlined, had 9 points in his first 10 games and then still finished with 140. He went nuclear after that. Only 2 players in NHL history have ever went back-to-back 140-plus seasons. Gretzky did it 11 years in a row, and Lemieux did it once in 88, 89. You look at Nate's start, 140 points seems very realistic for him, and it is you put yourself in that category, that's, to me, you know what, one great year is one thing. Doing it multiple times in a row is highly, highly impressive. And he's, I know it's early, but you look at the pace that he's on, he's had, and you need some of those whopper games, 5-point games he's already had a few of those already. And man, the way they're playing with him, Rantanen and McCarr, thankfully wasn't, his injury was nothing serious, and they're getting guys back. Man, it seems, I know it's crazy to just assume a guy's going to get 140 points, but the way he's playing 140 points, it's he scored 140. He could easily get 150 this year.
Well, he's on pace for 154. I wonder if there's a human nature element to this, because he knows that everyone's been out and his team has been so thin that he's basically had to put pedal to the metal just to try and keep his team afloat. And even with the ridiculous start to the season that he's had, the Colorado Avalanche are just sort of treading water at 8-8. And maybe that's the best they could have hoped for, given all the injuries that they've had. But when you get a bunch of guys back and you at some point activate Nichushkin here, I think he can play on Friday, and I believe he's scheduled to play on Friday. And then you, at some point, hopefully you see Landeskog back out there. Is there a penchant, and it's not really in his nature because he's so driven, but is there a penchant at all? Hey, I don't need to do as much. Does he take his foot off the gas? Will he have another stretch of 10 games, like you mentioned his start last year, where he just scores 9 points? And it's not that anyone would blink at that. It's just, in order to get to 140, obviously there's an adjustment down from 154 that would be built into that. But I just wonder, will the Avs will their top players remain as hungry once those other guys get back?
Yeah. And Kucherov's obviously
they've been asked to do a lot.
Oh God. Yeah. They've been asked to carry the team really in a way, and they've done very well doing it. And, their confidence, though, every game he goes into, he must just be hey, we're getting 2 points. No big deal. And you believe it, it's not a hope thing. It's a belief thing. And that makes a huge difference. On the other side of things, Frank, we talk about guys who, McDavid, getting back to McDavid, you think that's inevitable? Freddie Anderson injury, we're you hate it, but it's probably coming. And now Mark Stone, another guy who's been injury prone, misses a game, and they list him as day-to-day, and you just wonder, and I wonder how much of an impact that has on Vegas, because that line was unreal for them. And, they're the best 5-on-5 scoring team in the league. And now they're emotional Energizer bunnies out again.
I mean, how could it not impact them? It's that line, for my money, best line in hockey, and not really close.
Oh yeah. It's hard for him, Michael, and Barbashev. Yeah. They've been playing great.
By the way, the Jets, though, because when you look at some of the top scorers in the league, the Jets, you look at the top 25, it's littered with Jets.
Oh, buddy.
11 players that have double-digit points in the first 15 games of the season. That's insane.
Yeah.
Where'd that come
Yeah.
from? And that's
Oh,
actually what a big thing that I talked about with Kevin Cheveldayoff in our conversation. So hopefully you'll enjoy it.
yeah. Well, and it's, it's forwards. It's their top three lines, your defense, you got Morrissey and Pionk chipping in, and man, like there's no right now real weakness at all that you see in that team. And none of them are having it's consistent numbers. Yes. No one's like Kyle Connor, I think, leads their team with 19 points in 15 games, which is a good number. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like, he's not at 30. He's not like crazy. And he's always been a consistent scorer. His career high is 47. If he's on pace for 50, no one's shocked by it by any stretch. Like they're obviously, it's hard to have that many guys producing at the same time, but they're getting a lot of 2 assists on a lot of their goals. Like a lot of their goals, Frank, are everybody's moving the puck around, and Winnipeg right now is highly entertaining to watch. And the other thing that I do want to shout out about Winnipeg, no fan base makes the game more fun than the Jets fans with their chants that they come up with in games. They're fantastic, right? There was when Ovi came in, they're like, Crosby's better. Crosby's not even there. It's such they're not derogatory. They're witty. They're fun. And shout out to the Jets fans. I don't know who comes up with that and how they get it started in the building. I don't know. What do? Do they put it out on social media? Hey, this is what we're going to chant. Or is it just now everybody pays attention in one section, wherever it starts, that guy starts it and then everybody follows. I don't know how they get it choreographed, because that to me is pretty hard to do. So it's fun to watch though. They had Ottinger in there the other day, and they're cheering about USA backup before Hellebuck. Those are great. The game, it makes it more fun. And
I agree.
It's awesome.
And guess what? They haven't really had a ton to cheer about. Not to say that their team has been bad, but I think there had been this confluence of things that happened where the team was successful for so long. They hadn't gotten over the hump in the playoffs. The building is small. And what happened was ticket prices went up at the same time that the team was just kind of in the mix, but not really doing much. And interest, I don't want to say it waned, but fans were like, oh, I'll just watch from home. And so to have that environment back, you see a game in Winnipeg and it is electric. It's such a small building. You're on top of everything. For me, if I'm going to pick any place in the league to watch a game, it's Winnipeg or Montreal. And for 2 totally different reasons, but mostly because of environment.
Yeah. And it's funny, Frank, if you look at the Jets, the one time where they went deep in the playoffs was in the shortened season, where they were technically 9th in the league at that point. Then it got shut down for a few months. There's been years where they have finished really high and done nothing. Like last year, they had 110 points. They had the 4th best record in the league, and they didn't just lose in the first round. They got steamrolled, right? It was like they were tied down on the railroad tracks and just driven over. I think they've only had makes it harder.
2 or 3 sellouts so far this season in a small building. And that's tough. So good to see that city and that market energized again, and hopefully it's full.
Well, dude, ticket prices in a lot of the Canadian markets doesn't get talked enough about how ridiculous it is. Let's call a spade here. So those teams, I get that you have fan bases that are rabid, but I don't blame a Winnipeg Jets fan if they're like, man, everything else is going up in price. Hey, hockey is an extra bonus. It's not mandatory, right? I got to get my kids clothes. I got to have food. I got to pay my power bills, water bill, blah, blah, blah. Those things are mandatory. Sports is like a bonus. And so I never get upset when fans choose not to go to the rink when the price tag is ridiculously high.
You should see the prices for Four Nations Faceoff.
Oh, I can imagine.
What do you think a lower bowl seat costs for U.S.
For just Canada? Like the first game?
No, the U.S. It's still preliminary round, but U.S. Canada Saturday night, February 15th.
Lower bowl, 800.
Try 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, you're put at a price point where there's only a select few of people. Now, some people will plan, and that'll be like a holiday for them. They'll plan it well in advance, but it is. And hey, I get it, supply and demand. I understand all that. So don't give me a lesson out there. Anybody's like, oh, wow, this, I get why you do it. But to me, at times it's ultra greed, and it's somewhat annoying.
Well, it's also a one-off tournament that doesn't have any history to it. Yeah, we're all excited. Can't wait to see McDavid and Crosby and MacKinnon together on one team for the first time. That's going to be unbelievable. But you have to remember too where this is being held. Like, Montreal is a great hockey market, but they love the Canadians. They didn't sell out World Juniors when they had them. So to put an international event there, yeah, US, Canada, that's going to sell out. You're going to have enough people come across the border. But Finland, US, probably not going to be a sellout.
Yeah. Well, are they building the packages though that you have to buy? Like, you can't just buy a single game.
No, each game I think is its own thing.
Now, hey, speaking of now I know it's not the Olympics, but you talked to World Juniors. The great stat that I saw from the Hall of Fame weekend, Frank, was that in 2010 and 2014 Olympics, the leading scorer for Canada was Shea Weber. In those two combined Olympics, Shea Weber had the most. I remember there was a time where people actually believed that PK Subban, there's lots of guys crunching their numbers, that Subban was better player than Shea Weber. And I was like, are you on like planet Zoltar? Like, not even close. Shea Weber was on a team that was never highly offensive in Nashville for the most part of his career. But then when you got the best of the best, and you listen to Ken Hitchcock and other guys who coached him, Shea Weber was he was one of the strongest humans ever. Like, he would just grab people and toss them like grown men in the NHL, and he could move them around like they were like bantam U15 players. It was crazy. But that stat to me is one of my favorite stats, is that between those two, he led Canada in scoring in those two Olympics combined.
That guy took an absolute beating.
Oh,
his body, I shudder to think of what it's going to be like at 65 or 70 years old. Because you think back to that cup final in 2021. I mean, he was like quite literally held together by duct tape.
Yeah.
Well,
he talked about it.
Here's the thing. I ran into someone from the Flyers front office at Hall of Fame, and they said, "Oh yeah, we congratulated Shea on going in as a Flyer." And I was laughing because I was like, "Yep, you had him for 5 days with that offer sheet, and at least you made him a very, very wealthy man. 14 years, 110 million, still one of the biggest contracts ever handed out. And the amazing part about it is he's still being paid this year and next."
Yeah. He was a dominant force. And I think in ways maybe underappreciated because he played in Nashville for so long, Frank. It wasn't like a hockey mecca by any stretch of the imagination. They never had, if you're a defenseman, it's hard if you don't have any other elite offensive guys around you to really produce. You just look at it historically. So, but big and strong, could absolutely shoot the puck. But God, you watch him. I remember Zdeno Chara was huge and he would throw guys around, but I remember talking to forwards and they say, Shea Weber touches you, you're done. And these are some big men. And they're just like, Shea Weber makes them, you feel a little demasculated at times when Shea Weber's out there just moving you around and you got nothing to say other than yes, sir.
It's kind of like me at a urinal with Mike Keenan.
Is that all you got? Oh, well, guess you didn't live up to the name Frank the Prick that day, did you?
Quite literally.
Oh, awesome. Well, Frankie, you have yourself a good week. How long are you in Toronto for?
We got GM meetings today, and I'm heading home this afternoon.
Anything you expect on the docket of importance?
Well, there will definitely be some CHL and NCAA discussion, I'm sure, at least informally. There will be some talk about some cut-resistant material and improvements and advancements and what that might look like. And then the rest of it, that's why I'm looking forward to going to find out what else they're talking about.
Well, the NCAA is fascinating, Frank, because if you draft a player, NCAA, right, you get longer before you have to sign him. Where CHL guys, you have to sign within 2 years. And now if some of those guys go to NCAA, now obviously they wouldn't have signed a contract because you can't sign a contract and go. But I wonder if they'll put in some sort of, change in their status for players drafted out of there if they actually choose to go to NCAA. Do you get to retain their rights longer? I wonder if that, because I'm assuming if I'm a GM, that's something I might be looking at.
Yeah, these are all things that we need answers to, that they're just beginning to figure out. And I'll tell you this, in talking to people here at Hall of Fame this weekend, this is kind of like, this is the wild, wild west. There are a lot of things here that we haven't figured out what the ripple effects might be yet, and might not for a few years.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny. I think there's lots of people who think it'll actually make, you're going to have some younger American players come and play CHL for a bit. And then they can always go back, but you might see that. I really think that the one league, Frank, that's the U Sport in Canada is because they have a lot of guys leave after 20, they go there. Now they're going to be able to go NCAA if they want for those NCAA, and might even leave at 20. That's where I think U Sport's really going to have to pull up their socks a little bit here and become a little bit better of a marketer for the league.
Well, the BCHL is going to be in a tough spot. The USHL is definitely like you're already seeing their players being pillaged, and what you're going to see is players like Macklin Celebrini from Vancouver. He's not going to go to the USHL anymore to play 1 year before going to college. He's going to go play major junior now, because then you can still go to college after.
Yeah, he'd probably play there for a few years.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, because he could go younger, right? He could go there when he's 16 if he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, no, it'll be a fascinating thing to look at. Awesome. That's the rundown, episode 335, brought to you by Fountain Tire. Go to Fountain Tire or fountaintire.com and you get a set of 4 tires, including Goodyear. Save $225 right now. Have a good week. We'll talk to you later this week.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.